The night was thick with the scent of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. The old warehouse on the outskirts of town loomed like a forgotten relic, its broken windows and rusted walls a testament to years of neglect. Inside, the air was heavy with the stench of mildew and despair. Chains rattled in the darkness, the sound echoing through the hollow space like a mournful cry. I moved silently, my boots barely making a sound on the cracked concrete floor. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. I had spent weeks planning this, tracking her down, and finally I was here. She was here. In the center of the room, illuminated by a single flickering bulb, she sat. Her name was Alara, though I doubted anyone had called her by that name in years. Her once vibrant auburn hair was matted and dull, her porcelain skin marred by bruises and dirt. Her wrists were bound by thick iron chains, the metal biting into her flesh. But it was her eyes that struck me the most, deep emerald green, filled with a mixture of defiance and resignation. I stepped into the light, and her gaze snapped to me. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the sound of her shallow breathing. Then she spoke, her voice hoarse but steady. "You're not one of them." It wasn't a question. I shook my head, crouching down to her level. "No. I'm here to get you out." Her eyes narrowed, searching mine for any hint of deception. "Why?" I hesitated. How could I explain the dreams that had haunted me for months? The visions of her face, her chains, the feeling that I was somehow connected to her suffering. I couldn't. Not yet. "Because you don't belong here," I said simply, pulling a set of lockpicks from my pocket. "Hold still." She didn't flinch as I worked on the locks, her eyes never leaving my face. The first chain fell away with a clatter, and I moved to the next. As I worked, I could feel her studying me, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. "You're different," she murmured. "You're not afraid of me." I glanced up, meeting her gaze. "Should I be?" A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips, but she didn't answer. The second chain fell away, and I moved to the one around her ankles. Finally she was free. I stood, offering her my hand. "Let's go." She hesitated, her eyes flickering to the shadows around us. "They'll come after me." "After you." "I know," I said. "But we'll deal with that when the time comes." For a moment, she just stared at my outstretched hand. Then slowly she reached out and took it. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her skin cold against mine. I pulled her to her feet, and she swayed slightly, unsteady after so long in captivity. "Can you walk?" "Yes." She nodded, though her legs trembled. "I'll manage." We moved quickly, staying in the shadows as we made our way to the exit. The rain had started to fall, the droplets pattering against the roof like 1,000 tiny footsteps. I kept a firm grip on her hand, guiding her through the maze of corridors and out into the night. The cool air hit us like a slap, the rain soaking through our clothes within seconds. I led her to the car I had parked a few blocks away, helping her into the passenger seat before sliding behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, and I pulled away from the curb, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers and the steady drum of the rain. I could feel her watching me, her gaze like a weight on my skin. "You still haven't told me why you're doing this," she said finally, breaking the silence. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands tightening on the wheel. "I told you. You don't belong in chains." "That's not an answer," she said softly. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done." I glanced at her, taking in the way the rain had washed some of the dirt from her face, revealing the delicate features beneath. "I know enough." She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. You think you're saving me, but you're just taking on my burden. They'll never stop looking for me. And now they'll come for you too. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She was right, of course. I had known the risks when I decided to free her. But something inside me had demanded it, a pull I couldn't ignore. We drove in silence for a while longer, the city lights fading behind us as we headed into the countryside. Finally, I pulled into the driveway of a small, secluded cabin. It wasn't much, but it was safe for now. I helped her inside, lighting a fire in the hearth to chase away the chill. She stood by the window, staring out into the darkness, her arms wrapped around herself. You should rest, I said, breaking the silence. There are clothes in the bedroom. They might be a bit big, but they're clean. She didn't move, her gaze fixed on the rain-soaked trees outside. Why did you do it? She asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Because I couldn't stand the thought of you suffering. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw your face. 'Cause, I don't know. It felt like I had to. She turned to look at me then, her eyes searching mine. And then slowly she smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it reached her eyes in a way that made my chest ache. You just took responsibility for me, she said softly. You don't even know what that means. I took a step toward her, my heart pounding. Then tell me. She shook her head, the smile fading. Not yet. But you'll find out soon enough. Before I could respond, she turned and walked into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door, the weight of her words settling over me like a shroud. The days that followed were tense. Ilara kept to herself, speaking little and spending most of her time staring out the window. I tried to give her space, but the questions gnawed at me. Who was she? What had she done to deserve such a fate? And why did I feel so compelled to protect her? One night, as the fire crackled in the hearth, she finally broke her silence. You deserve to know the truth, she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the flames. I looked up from the book I had been pretending to read, my heart skipping a beat. About what? About me, she said, her eyes meeting mine. About why they kept me chained. I set the book aside, leaning forward. I'm listening. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clasped them in her lap. I'm not a human, she said finally, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. I stared at her, my mind racing. What do you mean? I mean, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes, that I'm not like you. I'm something else. Something dangerous. I didn't know what to say. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of her words. But deep down I realized I had always known. There had always been something otherworldly about her. Something that set her apart. What are you? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked away, her shoulders slumping. I'm a weapon, she said softly. Created, not born. Designed to destroy. They kept me chained because they were afraid of what I could do. Afraid of what I am. I sat there, stunned, as the pieces fell into place. The dreams, the pull I had felt toward her. It all made sense now. She was more than just a prisoner. She was a force of nature, a being of